Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Never ordinary. Good way to sum up the Vancouver Canucks, isn't it, Harmon?
Yeah, that was not a very fun game against your Wagon Flames there. I mean, let's just call it for what it was. The Canucks got decisively outplayed by the Flames at 5-on-5. Like, they couldn't match Calgary at even strength there, whether it was shots, chances. They were convincingly outplayed by the Calgary Flames at 5-on-5, which, to be honest, it's not totally unpredictable. It's not a huge shock. How times have we alluded to this team's underlying struggles over the last month, where they were 32nd in the league in controlling 5-on-5 shot attempts, even when Quinn Hughes was in the lineup. So now that you take him out, now that Elias Pettersson is out of the lineup, it's not a surprise. But man, this is not a pretty picture whatsoever.
I was going to say, I didn't really have much of an issue with the way they played. I mean, like we were talking about the path to winning without Quinn Hughes. We knew they were going to get caved at 5-on-5. That's part of the plan, Harm. It's part of the plan to get caved at 5-on-5. What isn't part of the plan is the untimely turnovers, the bad play from Noah Juleson. Like, that stuff isn't part of the plan. That was just honestly unacceptable. We talk a lot about Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson. We know those guys are good defensemen, and Mackenzie Weegar made a hell of a play to see. I don't know who it was behind him. I think it might have been Coronado. Whoever it was snuck behind Noah Juleson. Like, that's just a mental mistake from Juleson. That can't happen. Okay, that makes it 1-0. And then again, you're battling back from being down 2-1, and Carson Soucy makes the tape-to-tape pass to Jonathan Huberdeau, who scores his 16th goal of the year on the empty netter. Might I add, Jonathan Huberdeau, who Harmon said is the worst goal scorer in the league, would be leading the Canucks in goals right now. Just wanted to throw that out there. But in all seriousness, we're not going to do the Wagon Flames today. We're not. The Flames aren't a great team, but like their lineup was better than what the Canucks were able to ice in that game. I thought the Flames had the better lineup heading into that game. Certainly the better defense.
Yeah, the way I look at it too is the Canucks top line came to play, but they basically had no help. I mean, Brock Besser scored. I know that was on the power play, but he gets on the score sheet. He had 5 shots in that game. JT Miller had 5 shots in that game. That top line was engaged. They were driving play. They were creating chances. The Canucks outshot the Flames 10-4 at 5-on-5 with the Miller line on the ice. In all other 5-on-5 minutes, the Flames had a 22-8 advantage in 5-on-5 shots. So they were sort of throttled whenever that Miller line wasn't on the ice. It was an off night for Suter and Garland and their line. They got completely caved in. Their execution was sloppy with the puck. They were on the ice for one of the goals against the game winner. Kadri won it, and that's like looking back at that game winner. It's a type of breakdown that it should have never been a 3-on-2 in the first place, because the Canucks had all of their 5 players set in a neutral zone structure. Between Suter and Joshua, F2 and F3 in that sequence, they just made the wrong reads. They got sort of beat. Weegar made a tremendous stretch pass, and it turned into a 3-on-2, but you just can't have that type of breakdown in that situation. And again, both Calgary goals also showed the value of good puck moving, right? And how that could directly lead to offense. And the Canucks just don't have that type of distributor on the back end right now.
I included an instant reaction, but obviously the morning of, I wrote an article where I talked about Canucks management. We have a lot to get to today, as I always say, but we really do today. The title of today's show is Something Has to Give, and that's because Patrick Alvin gave an interview right ahead of New Year's Eve that I reacted to in an article on Canucks Army. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. But basically what I really highlighted and harped on was there's no puck movers on this team. And the miscalculation came from management in the offseason. I'm not sitting here saying, well, I called it, because I'll remind people gladly. When these moves were made, there were people that were saying this is horrible, they shouldn't have done this. And I said, yeah, maybe they should have targeted someone like Sean Walker instead. Maybe they should have done something different. And it doesn't have to be in free agency. Maybe they trade for someone. But, like, I took them at their word. It was clear that they believed that they would be able to turn a guy like Vinny Desharnais into something that they just haven't been able to. And again, you get that benefit of the doubt, I think. At least in my mind, they did when it came to how I was talking about this team in the offseason and heading into this season. Was they've made a bet and we'll see how it works out. Now we know it hasn't worked out, and like that's on management. That is on management. There's a reason those guys are paid a lot of money to put the team together, and there's a reason why I'm not paid a lot of money to put the team together, right? So that's what it comes down to, is it's just like, take some ownership, and that's what I really highlighted in that piece, and we'll talk about that in a second, but this is all a roundabout way of me saying, Harman, you bet I took a victory lap when the Canucks got a 2-on-1 because Vinny Desharnais quickly moved the puck up the ice and immediately got a rush chance. Funny how that works when your defenseman actually moved the puck quickly, and I think it was like glassing out, but it moved. He moved the puck quickly, just not the way that we expect the puck to be moved quickly, I guess. But it worked out. It worked out. They get the 2-on-1 chance. You get a rush chance, and that's what happens. You need those puck movers, and Calgary had those puck movers, which is what you were trying to highlight.
Yeah, the other thing that came out a couple of days ago, I'm trying to remember where the original report was from. Maybe it was from Dollywall on Blue Sky. But I remember on the last show, I think it was, we were talking about how the timeline for Quinn Hughes might be 3 weeks. I believe it was Dollywall who was talking about how it may be a lot shorter than that, which I don't know if that's Quinn looking at the state of this team, the standings, and sort of being like, I got to get back in the lineup as quickly as I can to salvage the season, or if you're just recovering, or if the recovery is just going really well. But in either case, like, that's notable too. Because for a while there, we were sort of looking at the middle part of the January schedule where they play teams like Washington, Carolina, Toronto, LA, and Edmonton. And if it was based off the original 3-week timeline, Hughes probably wouldn't have played in some of those games. And that would have been really problematic. But now it sounds like if Hughes does indeed return quicker than we expect, that he would perhaps be available against some of those tougher opponents.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, you're right. That was a report from Rick Dollywall over on Blue Sky. Yes, we don't know if Quinn is rushing back, but I'm thinking it's a pretty safe bet that Quinn's rushing himself back. Again, I asked Talking about it. I went to practice on Monday, I think it was. And I asked Talking about Quinn, and he shared with me he's bored. He's bored right now. He's just bored, and he wants to be back. Of course he wants to be back. Okay, lots in the chat so far. Make sure you like, subscribe to the channel, folks. We've got a lot to get to today. Anything else that you want to say about the loss to the Flames, Harm, before we kind of move on to this Alvin interview? Actually, let's do Seattle first. We'll do Seattle first after Calgary. Are you done talking about Calgary?
Yep.
Surprisingly, so am I. Let's talk.
Calgary Flames hockey team.
Let's talk about tonight's game. Tonight's game, the Canucks take on the Seattle Kraken. Limited information coming out of Seattle right now, but we do know that Thatcher Demko is going to start in goal. Guillaume Brisebois might slot in tonight, Harm. We don't know who he's going to slot in for, I don't think, unless you saw something I didn't. Don't know who Brisebois is going to slot in for, but it looks like Guillaume Brisebois might get a shot. This is interesting to me because on Monday, Taka was asked about Brisebois, and he talked about him being a guy that might be better suited for the NHL game than the AHL game. And we know Brisebois played games under Tocchet before, and Brisebois obviously has dealt with the concussion issues, which we should also mention started as a result of a Brandon Tanev hit in the preseason. So Canucks facing Brandon Tanev tonight, and Brisebois might be slotting into the lineup this evening as well. We just don't know who he's going to be in for. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see if he gets in. We assume, I think we have to assume at this point that it's Erik Brannstrom. That it's going to be Erik Brannstrom that comes out of the lineup for Brisebois to go in. Again, I know you want to keep the handedness the proper way with two lefties, a lefty coming out for a lefty coming in. But man, it is hard to watch Noah Juleson play right now. And it's, in my mind, like, that's the guy you take out of this lineup.
100%. I think it'd be a mistake, even though Brannstrom didn't have the best performance against the Flames, but against Seattle, I thought Brannstrom had a really good game, and you need his speed. You need his.
Oh, looks like we might have lost Harm here.
We lost Harm.
And he's
there
back.
He is. There he is. There's Harm. Harman was saying that you need Brannstrom's speed, and he's back. So Harman, take it from there.
You need his speed. You need his puck moving. You need somebody to quarterback the first shoot of power play. Like, would it be Tyler Myers, PP1?
Oh, good point. I didn't even think of that. Soucy. It's Tyler Myers and Carson Soucy. Those are your guys.
Yeah, and so to me, you need to lean on Brandstrom because he's the one defender out of your healthy options who can help drive a bit of offense and ensure that the forwards are able to get the puck reliably from the back end. So I agree with you. I think Julesen's been the biggest liability, and regardless of if he's the one who's taken out of the lineup or not, I think it's time to start reducing his minutes. Julesen in that Calgary game, for instance, was second among Canucks defenders behind only Tyler Myers in the number of 5-on-5 minutes he logged. Overall, he skated nearly 20 minutes, which I get it. The coaching staff doesn't have many alternative options. On the right side, you're looking at, okay, Vinny Desharnais, are you going to give him more minutes? It's not exactly like they have a lot of other great candidates to pick from. But in any case, Julesen is just way in over his head right now, and his deployment needs to be cut down.
Yeah, going to talk about that and much more. The chat is bumping today. I don't know why there's so many people. Thank you to everybody watching the show today on the YouTube live show and those in the chat. A lot of reaction about Erik Brandstrom coming out of the lineup, and as you can guess, the reaction is not very good. If you want your chat read on the show, then hit us with a super chat. Our super chat charity partner this season is the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show? Hit us with a super chat. Proceeds from our super chat will go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. A lot of people in the chat today. Really nice to see. This one from Brian Choi. He said, guys, if Brandstrom gets scratched tonight, then the best puck mover on the back end is Tyler Myers. Tocchet is going to completely lose me if he does that. One thing I highlighted in that article, Harm, that I was kind of alluding to, was the big issue with the Canucks blue line isn't so much that they didn't go out and get a puck mover, and that matters, of course. But one thing I highlighted was that after one injury, to Filip Hronek, where Tyler Myers now needs to go up to the top pair, Vinny Desharnais should have been the guy, theoretically, to move up to the second pair. But because he's been such a problem for them this season, that forced seventh defenseman Noah Julesen, a guy that the coaching staff just feels like they can trust has been here longer, that forced him to kind of leapfrog Desharnais on the depth chart. That usually wouldn't happen. It would be whoever, everybody just moves up. That would be how it is, right? But now you have the seventh defenseman within every sense of the word, as I wrote, in Noah Julesen. You have him slotting up to the top four. And yes, depth matters a lot, but that's kind of the underlying issue as well, is just how badly they miscalculated with Vinny Desharnais. And he's been better. He's been better since his minutes have been limited, but that's a problem in itself, that they feel like they can't put him in a top four role no matter how bad Noah Julesen's played.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when you look at the potential thought process, you try and reverse engineer how management may have looked at it. The formula last year was, okay, they had this super elite level top pair with Hughes and Hronek. They were going to eat a ton of minutes, drive elite level offense, and then they almost had this Moneyball-like group of big hulking defensemen in their bottom four. And it wasn't so much a clearly defined second pair that is above average relative to NHL standards, and then a traditional third pair. It was more just a relatively a bottom four that played relatively even minutes. The issue with that, in hindsight, which it isn't purely hindsight because this should have been part of the calculus and thought process in the moment, but the issue is Soucy and Myers had near career best seasons last year. Those two, especially Soucy, have taken a step back, and that, when players have career best seasons, I think you can't always bake in that assumption that they're going to maintain that level the following years, especially in Soucy's case. He didn't have a really long track record of delivering top four levels. So that's the first pillar, is the two of your bottom four defensemen from last year have taken steps back, Soucy in particular. And then on top of that, Forbort and Desharnais are significant downgrades compared to Cole and Zadorov, right? Ian Cole was that guy who could, okay, there's an injury, he's going to step up and play on the second pair for a little bit, and he can competently hold those minutes and matchups down. He has the IQ and outlet passing ability to where despite being a slower defenseman, he can contribute as a secondary puck mover, as did Zadorov because of how well he could skate. So I think that's where like that formula doesn't work when your bottom four personnel weaken significantly because of internal sort of regression from Soucy and Myers, and then also two notable departures that weren't adequately replaced.
We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about all this. Let's get to the iMac article. Ian McIntyre sits down with Canucks GM Patrick Alvin, and a lot of things were said. I think most notably, Patrick Alvin pretty clearly calls out Elias Pettersson, even doesn't shut down the idea of trading Pettersson, who of course doesn't have any trade protection in this year one of his 8-year contract. He's going to have a full no move clause for the 7 years that follow this year, but as it stands right now, he has no trade protection until July 1st. Let's pull up these quotes, Jacob. We've got so many to get through, so let's just kind of rapid fire it. Let's start with Alvin on Pettersson. This is what the GM had to say when he was asked by IMAC about the out that the Canucks have because there's no trade protection. Alvin, smiling, according to IMAC, said, well, you know Jim Rutherford's history. We want to build a team that sets us up for long-term success, building around the long-term deals with Miller and Petey, having Quinn and Demko locked up, Philip Hronek and Jake DeBrusk. I mean, those are big pieces. Petey has shown up to this point that he's an extremely talented quality player that could and should be a number one center. I believe in him. I believe that he's capable, but he needs to mature and understand that there are certain expectations and it does not get easier. And you need to face the music when things don't go well. Is a trade possible? I guess I would say anything is possible. Okay, so a few things here. Harm doesn't shut it down, quite clearly calls out his number one center, and I don't think anybody really has a problem with this. I certainly don't. I do look at this as kind of a final warning to not only Pettersson, but the core that it's like, hey, like, you're not going to get a fourth coach. You're not going to get a fifth coach. Like, there's going to be some changes here if things don't turn around. I mean, Pettersson's hurt right now as well, but again, it's the context of the whole season. And I want that to be the theme that people remember is we're not just having this conversation because of a bad month of December. This is like an entire season now. Excuse me, not an entire season, but the entirety of this season that we're using as the sample size for this. And of course, so is the general manager. He's not just saying this because of a bad couple weeks. How do you read into this, Harm?
Yeah, I mainly interpret that as, well, first of all, the context that everybody should keep in mind is that Alvin, for most of his tenure as Canucks general manager, has been the king of saying a lot without actually saying anything. Right? From the beginning, he is so good at answering questions and speaking, but not really revealing a whole lot. So for him to come out and have an interview where he drops these types of bombshells, that's just not him. This is very intentional. This is very calculated. And in my mind, it's not so much trying to perpetuate this idea that, oh, we could look to trade Elias Pettersson. I think it's more trying to give this core group and everybody in their organization, frankly, a bit of a kick in the rear to get their act together. That's how I sort of read into it, because ultimately, I don't think you win an Elias Pettersson trade. We don't need to talk about it in depth. We've already sort of touched on it before when we've been asked about it, but you're not going to win trading a star player who's 26 years old and still in his still in his prime. I don't think that's a good idea. And ultimately, it's not like I read that quote and thought, oh, that there's necessarily going to be a significant trade happening mid-season.
The call-outs didn't stop there. Tocchet was catching some, mostly about the team playing consistently, and that's his job to get them playing with some consistency. Alvin also called out the other star players. Of course, and folks, when we say star players, when we're talking about players getting called out, I'm not going to say it each time. Just know we're not talking about Quinn Hughes. Nobody has an issue with Quinn Hughes. Like, you can't have an issue with what Quinn Hughes has done this season. So when we say star players need to be better, when Alvin says that, he's obviously not talking about Quinn Hughes. So let's just get that out of the way. But this quote, the one about the other star players, this was what Alvin said. He said, I think it's fair to say that you expect your best players to be the difference makers and the best players when you need them. And unfortunately, I think we haven't got the most out of those specific guys. If those guys would have performed to their capability, I think we probably would have won a couple more games. So it's hard. Do I expect more from them? Absolutely. I think we've been very fortunate up to this point that some of the other players have actually chipped in and helped us out a lot. Of course, those being your Kiefer Sherwoods, your Teddy Blugers, throughout the lineup as well. And not to mention like Danton Heinen as well, 11 goals, 19 points from P.S. Suter. They've gotten some good production down the lineup, but Alvin taking some, I don't want to even call it shots, just taking aim at the top players and saying like, hey, these guys need to be better. Talking about these top players, I didn't have an issue with it. And again, I don't think anybody has an issue with it. Talking about Rick Tocchet and how he needs to be better, don't have an issue with it. Like, he doesn't have a contract beyond this year, and that's going to start to get brought up more, but don't have an issue with it. Don't have an issue with any of this, really. Don't have an issue with, the blame being put on players. Don't have an issue with part of the blame being put on Tocchet as well. What I personally took an issue with when it came to this article, Harm, and this interview, was just the lack of, and in hindsight, we maybe should have done things a little bit differently, or we're going to need to do something to make this better. Just no real owning up to their part in it in the case of management. And that's where I took issue. And that's kind of what the whole article I wrote this week was about, was just that, like, where's the ownership here from management saying like, hey, you know what, we have a part in this too, and we didn't put out the best team that we could have, and we could have done this differently. And again, I saw a lot of response being like, what do you want them to do? Say like, yeah, we miscalculated on Vinny sucks. It's like, no, you don't have to name names. Just say like, yeah, we maybe made some mistakes, and we would have liked to have done some things differently for sure, and this team isn't what we thought it was going to be. Again, I said this in the article as well. You look at this team and you look at their blue line. What more can Rick Tocchet really get out of them? You talk about wanting to create more rush offense, and this being a philosophy that the organization had that went down to the coaching staff from management. Like, they wanted to see it too. It's more conducive to success in the playoffs. They wanted to create more off the rush. That project's on hold as long as Quinn Hughes is out, Harm. And management took the approach of going out and getting a bunch of wingers and getting a bunch of forward help to help create off the rush more. And while that's all fine and dandy, they miscalculated. Like, we can say that. They miscalculated how much of that needed to be part of how much the back end needed to be a part of that rush offense project. Because now the project's just on hold. We know they're not going to create off the rush without Quinn. And for the most part, Harm, this season, they've been unable to win their non-Hughes minutes, not because the forwards, and again, the forwards need to be better. We know that. The forwards do need to be better. Elise Pettersson needs to be better. JT Miller needs to be better. Of course, we know that. But the big part in this is, in my mind, the biggest part of this is that Quinn Hughes is the only guy who can move the puck with consistency on this team.
Yeah, I agree with the overall point that management didn't really take ownership for their part in that interview. But I will add, number one, Alvin wasn't directly asked about the defense or the blue line, which he probably should have been. Like, that has been one of the most consistent themes and issues with this team, is the inability for the club to move the puck out of the defensive zone. And I was a little bit surprised that he wasn't asked. And the reason I bring that up is, if Alvin was asked about the blue line specifically, then who knows? Perhaps he would have taken accountability, right? It's not as if I expected Alvin to, unprompted, when he's not even asked about the blue line, necessarily take ownership for that. I
will say, though, the inconsistency questions, third question in the interview, when you're talking about the club's inconsistency, like that, to me, that's an opening. And I get it. He wasn't explicitly asked about the defense, sure. But we all know how calculated this was, and how Alvin knew what he was doing. There was opportunities in my mind, even if you're not explicitly asked about it. Like, he brought up other stuff unprompted in the interview. You know what I mean? Like, it's still on him and on management to take ownership for this, in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with your overall point. I thought it was a great article you had. I texted you as much. I just wanted to add that piece of context,
sure,
because it'd be a lot worse if let's say Alvin was asked about the blue line and then sort of ducked the question or didn't take ownership. It's still not a great look, but I figured we should clarify that as just part of the conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Brian Choi saying as well in the chat, he said if he can throw his star players under the bus, then he can criticize his new signings as well. In response to what I was saying earlier about people saying, well, what do you want him to say? Similar. Okay. The other thing from this article that I found interesting was Alvin kind of hinting at that it's really hard to make a trade right now. And we've heard stuff about the Canucks don't want to make a panic deal. Who does? But we've heard things about them not being able to make the trade because the things that they want to give up aren't going to get it done. And teams want more. Teams want more from the Canucks. You can bet that the tournament that Tom Willander's having probably raises his trade stock quite a bit. Don't know if that's a good or bad thing for the Canucks. Of course, it's good that Willander's having the tournament that he's having, but this idea of trading Tom Willander, like he should be able to get you more on the trade market if you really want to trade Tom Willander. But the more I watch of him at the World Juniors, Harm, the more I say maybe don't trade Tom Willander.
That would be a non-starter for me, to be totally honest with you, especially because this team look like they're a cup contender? Agreed. Now, they will get Hughes back. They will get Pettersson back. And there is a pathway for them to get on a roll, maybe add a piece to the deadline. And all of a sudden, you're feeling a lot more positive about the team's odds of going on a potentially deep playoff run. But more than half the league is looking for top 4 defense help. You have Tom Willander, blue chip prospect on the right side, which is even harder to find talent on. You got this young piece who could be part of your building block, part of your core for a long time on an entry level contract. Like that's the last type of piece I want to trade.
Can I also say this? I know I've gotten flack for this in the past. I don't know if Dave Hall agrees with me, so that's my barometer, and I should talk to him about it first. But like I've watched a lot of Sweden at this World Junior. I don't watch BU games, I'll be honest. I haven't watched much BU this year. Tom Willander is certainly, and I know he's playing against other under 20-year-olds, I get it. But man, it is hard to watch Canucks games and then watch World Junior games and not think that Tom Willander can sign at the end of this year and slot right into the Canucks NHL lineup. It's hard for me not to think that, Harm. Like we saw Quinn Hughes do it. Hell, we saw Cole McWard do it at the end of his collegiate season when he signed with the Canucks. I know circumstances are different. You're out of the playoffs, but it is just hard for me to look at this player right now and say, yeah, he's going to sign at the end of this year, go to Abbotsford, and then he's going to play the entirety of next season in Abbotsford. I don't know if it's a hot take. Call it my first hot take of 2025. Feel free to clip it, Jacob. Tom Willander signing at the end of this year, and he is playing NHL games. I don't know how many. I don't know how many AHL games he's going to play. But with the state of this blue line right now, you bring back Filip Hronek. You cannot tell me that Tom Willander is a worse option on the third pair than Vincent Desharnais. Can't tell me he's a worse option on the second pair than Noah Juulsen. You can't. My hot take, my first prediction in 2025. I don't know if it's a hot take. I'm sure people won't think it is. My first prediction in 2025 is this guy is going to play games at the end of this year.
Interesting. And I understand your thought process and rationale. The issue a potential issue I see is by the time Willander's collegiate season will end, when he'd be eligible to sign and turn pro, by that point, Filip Hronek is presumably healthy. Mm-hmm. So now you've got Hronek and Myers on the right side. Plus, you're already having, you also have Juulsen and Desharnais on the right side too. Is there an opportunity for, how is Willander going to crack the lineup when we know that the third pair righty role is going to go to a guy who kills penalties, whether that's Juulsen or Desharnais? They value those guys' PK ability. They're not going to trust Willander in that role right away. So that's just, if they're healthy on the right side, it's gonna be tough. Which they very well could be by the time Willander turns pro. I don't know if that opportunity to play as part of the top 6 is going to be there.
It should though, it should, and I think that's the new take. Don't clip it, Jacob, but that's the new take. Is it should be there. You got to make room for this kid. He's playing great. He's playing such good hockey right now at the World Juniors, and I've seen enough. I've seen enough. Get him in the lineup.
Maybe, but we'll see, right? Willander's a great prospect, but And let me make it clear, this has been a good development year for him. Like, his trajectory has accelerated. I was originally sort of looking at him as a piece that, okay, when he turns pro, could he need to spend most of next season in the AHL? We'll see. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he'll be an NHL option as soon as this coming season, and makes the team out of training camp next September. But it's also the World Juniors, man. Like, Oli Levy looked great at the World Juniors. And again, I'm not trying to compare them as prospects at all.
Heard it here first.
But the point being, don't watch a guy dominate at World Juniors and think, oh, he's immediately NHL ready.
Fair enough, Harm. But we've heard Dave say good things about him all year long.
I agree. Like, he's had a really good, like, his stock has gone up this season.
Yeah.
As far as how quickly he could make an NHL impact, his potential ceiling. Much like Lecker-Mackey in his Draft Plus 2 season really started to take off. Like, Willander is following that type of trajectory, and that is a really, really good sign. I'm also just generally a believer that when you're dealing with prospects, development isn't always linear. So I would rather manage my expectations and take a slower approach in my mind of expectations and be pleasantly surprised rather than projecting a really optimistic scenario for how quickly a prospect will develop and then be let down.
I will also say this just real quick. The PK thing is a good point, that you're going to trust Jules and you're going to trust A, but I think the equation that you kind of have to do is how much does this player hurt us at 5-on-5 compared to what Willander could bring at 5-on-5? Obviously the puck moving ability, the skating ability. And like, I'm just assuming that next season Willander's killing penalties. Like, Willander's going to be a PKer in the NHL. Like, that's a staple of his game. I think he does it at BU. Again, I don't watch BU, but like, he's on the top penalty killing unit for Sweden right now, and I think he's doing a good job, doing a good enough job at the World Juniors. Again, it is the World Juniors, but back to this take of end of the season, I don't see why you can't put him in at the end of the season and say you're going to be on the second PK unit with what he's going to bring at 5-on-5. I don't know. I think you're overthinking it if you look at that and say, well, we need Noah Julesen's penalty killing prowess, or we need Vinny Desharnais' penalty killing prowess. Yeah, they're going to hurt us a lot in all the other moments when we're not shorthanded, which, by the way, is most of the game. I don't know. I do see the path. I do see the path for Willander, and I want to see him play NHL games. So I'm going to leave that there. That's the first hot take of 2025 is Willander's going to play NHL games. Okay, this one from Nick Pocek on Willander. He said, can he just drop out of school now? He's a right-handed defenseman. He doesn't even need to know how to read to be rich. Just look at Vinny. That's good. It's good. Very good. With that, let's get to... Actually, you know what? I wanted to talk a little bit more about this something has to give thing. We didn't even get to everything that we were going to get to. The reason I say something has to give, Harm, is we had this Alvin interview with IMAC. To me, this was like a last warning for everyone. Like, it's a last warning for the core. It's a last warning for the fan base to just say, like, hey, just so you guys know, we're not going to be afraid to shake things up, and we're not going to be afraid to do anything. Lemonade's hubby in the chat said 100% it's a final warning. Nick Kyprios wrote today over at the Toronto Star that he didn't even say, like, I'm hearing or whatever. He's just saying, like, the Canucks are considering a major shakeup. And, of course, everybody's going to think this means Miller, Pettersson. I know that's where everybody's mind immediately goes. To me, like, I read it as not so much they're going to make a big addition, although it could mean that. I read it more as like, okay, like they're going to do something, whether that's trading Brock Besser, whether that's starting to listen on Miller, starting to listen on Pettersson. They're going to do something, I think, to shake up this core is really the sense I get with the Alvin interview and the Kyprios stuff as well. I think Friedman said something similar today because, of course, he did. But the sense we get is just that if the losing continues like it has right now, like something has to give with this team, whether that be going out and getting somebody, whether that be Quinn Hughes is back. They look great. They're going to go get a right shot defenseman and all is saved. They're going to go get a puck mover for the second pairing and a lot of the issues get fixed, which I believe it would. The further you fall in that playoff bar, the harder it becomes in my mind to make that big trade and justify it and say, yeah, this is the big trade this team needed. What are you really fighting for at that point? When they made the big trades last year, this team was at the top of the NHL standings. Let's remember that. And right now, they are out of the wild card picture.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with the idea that something has to give. Just because, for starters, I don't see a scenario where you make a trade where you're significantly shaking up the core and you're getting better this season, right? Whether it's pick your guy, whether it's Miller, whether it's Pettersson, whether it's Besser, you're not moving one of those pieces and getting better this season, right? And so if we're talking about a shaking up the core, to me, that's more of an off-season conversation. More likely. I'm not saying
no, I follow your thinking. Your thinking's pretty go on. Yeah.
Like, my point is, if you're going in the direction of shaking the core up and this just isn't gonna work, then that's a big picture conversation that, to me, like, doesn't have, like, you don't have to make that move in the middle of the season. In fact, it's usually more difficult to orchestrate a trade and deal of that magnitude in the middle of the season when most teams already have their roster set. They don't have as much cap space. You're going to have fewer suitors on the market. And then the other scenario is, or the other possibility is, going out and acquiring a guy, making a big splash to, let's say, bring in that top four defenseman. And again, like, you consider your possibilities, but you don't have to make that move, especially when you're not even certain if this team is capable of going on a deep playoff run this season. So if anything, the way I'd be looking at it is Hughes and Pettersson, you expect them to be back relatively soon. You hope that once those guys return, you get a clearer picture of what this team is. You'll also get Hronek at some point relatively soon before the deadline. Once the team is healthy, I think you wait to see where exactly they're at, how they're performing, and then you sort of decide on your next moves there. I'm not necessarily at the point where I'm like, something has to give. I in fact would be in more of a wait and see mode, and you react accordingly. Interesting.
Because I just put all the pieces together, and I think, to me, like, this is just like the way the GM sounds right now. Like, I think we're going to see something sooner than we think. I think I'll just leave it there.
And it could happen, right? I'm just pushing back against the idea that, like, you have to do it, right? There's a difference, right? Like, there's a difference between, absolutely, like, work the phones, listen. That's your job as a GM, is to explore every possible opportunity to make your team better, not only this season, but beyond this year as well. But I don't want to create this narrative or have fans thinking that management is, like, let's say we go a month or two and there isn't, like, this massive move. Like, that's okay. Like, that I'm not going to criticize them for that. We just kind of, like, there's still so much uncertainty, right? There's, like, things look doom and gloom right now, but they don't have Hughes, Pettersson, and Hronek in the lineup right now. And again, those guys could be back, Pettersson and Hughes especially, really soon. And if they start winning games, the narrative in this market is going to change so quickly.
Winning games cures all. Okay, did you have anything else that you wanted to get to before we get to anyone else?
No, let's go to anyone else.
Let's go to anyone else, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta, a great spot for all games, home and away. We were there for the first viewing party of the season, and we will be there for more throughout the year, so don't miss out. But even if we're not there, you certainly should be. But it's just minutes from the arena. Come by before and after the game or whatever event you're downtown for with our games, weekly drink specials, and the recently updated street food menu. Greta Bar YVR is the place to be. 50 West Cordova Street is the address. Let the games begin. The other thing, when it comes to this something has to give thing, we had another chapter. I don't want to call it a chapter. Another thing to at least take note of when it comes to the Miller Pettersson stuff. Former teammate Brad Richardson, who was a Canuck twice, if you recall, Harm. And let's remember when Brad Richardson was a Canuck, because yes, he's 39 years old now, but you'll remember that Brad Richardson, after his 2-year stint from 2013 to 2015, obviously he wasn't teammates with Miller or Pettersson at that time. He was teammates with the Sedins, though. Then he comes back at the tail end of his career. His final games were played as a Vancouver Canuck. People will probably remember it. 21-22 season, the Canucks trade for him to kind of shore up their center depth in what ended up being a pretty fruitless, I think is the word. Final push to the playoffs. They came up just short after the Boudreaux bump. That was the season that they acquired Brad Richardson. So 21-22 season, Richardson plays 17 games. It is there that he is teammates with JT Miller.
First of all, I just want to say before you continue, I totally forgot about that second tenure.
Did you?
Like, I had told. It's funny because I was obviously covering the team on a day-by-day basis, but when I originally saw his comments that you'll get to, I was sort of thinking like, oh yeah, of course I remember his initial run, and then I went back and looked at his DB, and I was like, oh yeah, he did have another run with the Canucks. So funny.
So in that second stint, he was teammates with Miller and he was teammates with Pettersson. And on the Missing Curfew podcast over I don't want to call it the weekend. It wasn't the weekend. Recently, this is what Brad Richardson had to say.
I'll tell you this, and I'll be honestly super honest with you. And I've had this, and I was in that dressing room with those guys. I love JT, love him. He's a fucking animal. But I even told him, I said, hey, you're too hard on this kid.
Yeah,
you're too hard on him. And I said, I know you're saying exactly what I think, but he's a kid that doesn't take when you're on him, he's gonna shut it down. I told him like, hey, you're gonna lose this guy if you keep doing it.
well, you were
That's what I said to him. And JT he's the man, but there is a lot of tension. And something's going to give, I guarantee you. And I'm not saying you have to love every guy on your team. It helps, but something's going to give there. So we'll see.
there comes some pressure, right? And
No, 100%.
Richie, you know, I love JT Miller, and if there is a problem between the two of them, if I'm the GM, I'm trading Pettersson. I don't care what anyone says in Vancouver. I love JT Miller.
I like that Jacob cut Shane O'Brien talking about keeping JT Miller.
No, that was the end of the clip right there. So Shane O'Brien came on and said he would trade Pettersson, and then it just ended literally right there. It went to some
That's
outro
fantastic.
after that.
Phenomenal. Okay, that's great. I thought you cut it right there because we don't need to hear this. Anyways,
No,
okay.
that's where they cut their own clip.
So they gotta hire Jacob. So that's the clip that we wanted to talk to Brad Richardson weighing in on it. And again, I think the takeaway there is Richardson was here 17 games, noticed it enough that he pointed it out to JT Miller and said like, hey, you need to ease up on this kid. And the other interesting thing was the part where he said, I'm thinking exactly what you're thinking. That was interesting to me, Harm.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't want to keep diving into this.
I don't either. I hear
I like my initial reaction. I mean, just sort of behind the scenes, just like covering this team for a long time, being in the locker room consistently. Like what Richardson said, like it doesn't surprise me, like the way that he interpreted or talked about the situation. But again, like I don't think any of this is new. And I'm just on the boat hoping that the team can start winning and that those guys can start producing and that we can sort of move on to it. One thing I will say is this does, I think, validate that, like a lot of people have been saying, oh, media driven narrative, and have been blaming the media, toxic media, on and on. And look, I understand the fans' perspective that this is shoved down their throats 24/7 and it's become a soap opera. Like I get that. I understand why it'd be nauseating and why you would not want to hear any more about it. I'm at the point where I'm just like, I don't want to hear about this either. I'm kind of sick and tired of the narrative. But when a player in the locker room who is with both of those guys is saying something like that, it tells you there's at least some substance.
Of course.
Now, doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't preclude the possibility that the reports and the level of discussion have been overblown, but it does, at least, like, for people who are saying this is completely fabricated and there's nothing there and this is all the media's fault, that it's notable from that perspective.
Another former teammate spoke up on it. Bo Horvat tells the Hockey News that it's definitely been blown out of proportion. It's always a tough market that way. Any little piece of information gets magnified in those situations. And then he said it comes with the territory of playing in Vancouver. Bo Horvat running PR for the team. He was great in this interview. It was so funny. Like, he literally remembered the time when he was the Canucks captain and answered this as if he were still the captain of the Canucks. Honestly, it was hilarious. The other comments from Bo, He said, Miller and I got along great. There's going to be times when you're going to cuss each other out. There's going to be times when you're not going to like somebody, but at the same time, you respect everybody. You're all friends in there. You're all teammates, and you're all fighting towards the same goal. Are you going to get along all the time? No, but at the same time, he and I had a good relationship. Same with me and Petey. I was captain there, so it was my job to keep everybody even keel and to make sure everybody got along and that the team was fighting for the same thing, for the same goal. Horvat went on to talk about how he didn't like how his contract was handled. His subsequent trade to the New York Islanders, he didn't like how that was handled. Said that management, said one thing and did the complete opposite. It's frustrating when you're told one thing and the opposite happens. That's not to say I'm not happy here, where I am right now. I don't think we need to dive into that. The thing that I wanted to talk about, Hockey News asked about Horvat about the idea of a reunion with Elias Pettersson. And at first, I do also want to mention, it's changed now, but the author wrote, he spent a lot of time playing with Pettersson in Alberta. Thought that Vancouver was in Alberta. Changed it now. It says BC now. It says BC. But anyways, on Pettersson, this is what Horvat had to say. He's so good. He's got such skill and such poise with the puck. He's good at both ends of the rink. I think that's what gets underappreciated. He's so good defensively. He's obviously got a lethal shot that I think he should still utilize a little bit more than he does because he throws goalies off. He's a special player, and they're lucky to have him. He needs to... Oh, no, that was the Alvin quote. Okay. And then the idea of a reunion with Pettersson, he said, oh, God, yeah. He's a special player. He's a really good person. He's a special player that I respect a lot. I've had a lot of good success with him, too, in the past. If I get a chance to play with him again, I would love to. We could use him. So there you go. There it is. Elias Pettersson to the Islanders. Harmon, I thought it'd be fun to create our Islanders-Pettersson trade packages.
Very funny.
Noah Dobson. Noah Dobson is what it starts with.
Harm wants absolutely nothing to do with this right now. I can see it.
It's just like it's like asking, I don't know, Quinn Hughes, would you like to play with one of your best buds, Brady Tkachuk, one day? Or like, would you like to play on the same team as Jack one day? Like, of course the answer is yes. It doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
So let's make it happen. Because these guys want to play together, Harm. These guys want to play together. No. But I will say this. This idea that you're not going to win not that you're not going to win. No in-season Elias Pettersson trade is going to make you better this season. Like, I would say one with the New York Islanders might. Like, it might make you better. And you also have to take the context of what Elias Pettersson's played like this year. And that's a second-line center. So, I don't know.
And what has Noah Dobson played like this year? He's also quietly taken a huge step back.
So that's what I'm saying. So if you're throwing out Matt Barzal there and Noah Dobson, also Noah Dobson.
Not gonna. Whoa! You think Noah you're getting Barzal huge, and Dobson?
Noah Dobson. Yeah, I don't know.
You're not. Like, you're just not.
Why, for 11.6?
You think the Islanders would give a Barzal and Dobson for Pettersson?
I think you'd have to maybe throw in something else. Give him Nils Höglander.
They're not doing just Nils Höglander, a third, Kirill Kudryavtsev, and that'll push it through, right?
Oh, you brought up Kudryavtsev. People don't want him traded. You can't be getting rid of him. Noah Dobson. Okay, let's start with Noah Dobson. And we are going down this road. I've decided we're going down this road. You
slided me into this.
I did.
I did not agree to any of this.
I did. Yeah, I did. We're going down this Noah Dobson road, okay? Noah Dobson, you just said he took a step back. Sure, okay. Noah Dobson's step back is 80 steps ahead of Noah Juleson. It's 85 steps ahead of Vinny Desharnais. Noah Dobson makes this team so much better. Don't even start with me there. Come on.
Yeah, and meanwhile, your full-time second-line center going into potentially like that you're hoping can lead you to a deep playoff run is Pia Suter. I'm sure that'll work out swimmingly.
I said go get Matt Barzal. Did you not hear me?
But you're not getting both of them. Let's move on. This is like I'm losing brain cells.
Get yourself a first round pick, Dobson in a first, and you go flip that first round pick for your new second line center. Boom, done. It's not hard, Harm. I don't know why you have so much trouble with this.
I'm sure Jim Rutherford would love to hear about this.
Another quads masterclass.
Another masterclass. Add it to the what was that advice you had for Talk It 2-3 weeks ago?
I don't remember. Tell me. What is it?
It was a brilliant idea.
I actually don't remember. What was it? You can say it.
I don't remember.
Oh, okay. I thought you were trying not to say it. Okay. I don't remember. I'm sure it was great, though. I'm sure it was great.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, we got a super chat. A $6.99 super chat. Nice. He said, trade Besser at the deadline and re-sign him in the offseason at market value. 200 IQ play. Absolutely love to see it. The our oldest Chapman. Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen, but we appreciate the donation to the BC Mental Health Foundation. Love it. Have we talked about this? Has this happened like to anyone of significance in the NHL? It happens in baseball all the time.
Might have happened with Antoine Vermette back in the day. Like that's an example that comes to mind.
There's a pull.
But from what it's just not common.
No,
and
it's
not. That's not a strategy.
No. And like you also have to think Besser wouldn't appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move you for the last few months and then come back. If the Canucks were going to sign Besser, they would just do it now. Is the thing. They would do it before.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would do it before. Yeah. Oh, Nick Bukestad. Again, I said of significance. I don't think you can count Nick Bukestad as of significance, but Nick Bukestad got the Coyotes' Michael Kessel ring, if memory serves.
Yep.
Am I correct about that?
And a third,
and then
I
he
think.
re-signed. Yeah, and then he re-signed. Good times. Good times. Okay, don't think it's going to happen. Love the super chat. Thank you to Blue Line Bar Down in the chat. Okay. Jerry King, no idiot GM is giving the Canucks Dobson and a first for JT. But what about Petey? Okay, let's go. I think that's it. Is there anything else here?
There were some anyone else's earlier in the show that I put into our private chat, and anyone else in the chat here, drop one. We might have time for one or two more.
Okay. We see, this one from Ty David. How far away are the defense prospects? I talked about Tom Lander, want to see him immediately. Realistically, like being a real impact guy on defense, Tom Lander's probably 2 seasons away, like including this season. I would say he's going to spend 1 season in the AHL if you think that's where he's going to play, or if he's in the NHL, he's not going to be like a real impact guy. You don't think it's not going to be a Quinn Hughes thing where he makes an impact right away, but I think he's good enough to play in the NHL. I will say that, especially on this blue line. But Kirill Kudryavtsev, that's the other one that people were bringing up in the chat. Like, just bring him up to get a showcase on him. The thing I will say, and this is something we talk about, it feels like every training camp, I will remind everybody that, like, the step between Eric Brandstrom and Kirill Kudryavtsev is pretty significant, and Eric Brandstrom's having trouble cracking this lineup. And I just want to remind people about that it's fun to watch prospects, it's fun to hype up prospects, do it all the time. But the context of what it actually takes to play in the NHL, the Brandstrom bar, we'll call it the Brandstrom bar. Can you be better than Eric Brandstrom? If not, you're probably not going to play on this team right now. That's a simple fact.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
The Brandstrom bar, you like that? Is that sticking around?
I like that. Yeah, no, for
All
sure.
Right. Brandstrom bar, we're keeping it. The Brandstrom bar,
especially because Kudryavtsev's kind of a similar player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where smaller, undersized, but a smart puck mover and can skate.
Brian Choi said David Perron, when we were talking about guys who got traded and then re-signed. David Perron did that at least twice, I think, right? David Perron, there it is. I love it. Absolutely love it. People are asking for an early look at free agency. Harmon, who's your free agent target for the Canucks?
We got to make a new rule that if you're asking me these questions, you at least got to have a suggestion on your part too.
Okay, I have one. As soon as I
Okay.
pull up this dashboard.
Let's hear how wild this is.
Oh, dude, Mikko Rantanen's in UFA. Get him.
Yeah,
Okay, done.
great.
Your turn.
Just cap space, just like drops from the sky, right?
Okay, real question. I have a real question for you.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the UFAs. It's always fun to talk about that. But I have a real question for you. Does Mikael Granlund cash in free agency? Does he get a raise, whether that be with the Sharks or whoever? Does he get a raise in the $5 million cap hit that people were talking about? So overpaid. He was a cap dump in a trade, putting together a pretty solid year in San Jose. Does Mikael Granlund get a raise? That's my question.
It's a good question. It depends on the term that he wants, right?
Mhm.
So he's turning 33 in February. It also depends on how good he looks if he's traded to a contender. Because it's one thing to pile up points on a bad team. It's your market's going to be a lot more robust if he shows that he can also produce on a quality team in a role where he's playing as, let's say, a middle six center instead of playing like 19, 20 minutes a night. So those are going to be a couple of important points, because let's say he's willing to sign for 3 years of term. Could he get more than $5 million? Yeah, 100%, especially given how thin the center market typically is. But if he wants like 5 years of term, then like the cap hit's going to have to come down accordingly. I'd say, yeah, there's a chance. There's a chance if he goes to a contender and proves that that he can play there, that the market will be robust enough, and the center market is typically shallow enough that he'd perhaps be able to eclipse his current $5 million cap hit if term isn't his top priority. Also, if the Sharks are keeping him, they could easily overpay on AAV because they have tons of cap space, and that's typically what bad teams kind of have to do to keep good players around.
The old Chicago Blackhawks method. Quick look at the UFAs coming into the offseason. Marcus Pettersson's there. Ivan Provorov's there. A lot of defensemen that the Canucks have reportedly been interested in on the trade market are going to hit the free agent market. That being said, some of these guys are going to be rentals, and of course, at least one of them is going to sign with the club that trades for them. So that'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. My preliminary look, though, there are some options on defense. Jacob Chikrin's there. Do you think Chikrin gets extended in Washington? I'm going to say yes. I'm just going to say yeah. Like, I think they figure it out with him.
He's having a good year, and I would expect them to try and keep him, but it depends on the number, right? Aaron Ekblad's a UFA.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Aaron Ekblad to Vancouver is what you're saying.
Yeah, just keep jumping to conclusions.
He loves taxes, that Aaron Ekblad. I've heard that. If there's one thing Aaron Ekblad loves, it's taxes. So, okay, Nick Bocek in the chat said, the branch from Bar sounds like the Mendoza line. That's what I was going for. I love it that someone picked up on that. Do you know what the
like
Mendoza
the
line
one good
is?
take you had. Yeah, I do.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you know what that is. Branch from Bar. Put it on t-shirts. The branch from Bar. I love that. I'm going to be saying that a lot. I hope that starts to catch on. Love it. Okay, let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought... Oh, final thing. Sorry, had this and anyone else wanted to get to this. The Montreal Canadiens are getting hot. They've won 9 of their last 13 games, Harm, and I think the impressive thing for me is that they closed out the year with a win over the Vegas Golden Knights. Before that, it was a win over Tampa. Before that, it was a shutout victory over the Florida Panthers. They haven't just beat up on bad teams, although they have faced some bad teams along the way. They haven't just beat up on bad teams on this winning streak, and not winning streak, but these winning... these winning ways of theirs. It's come against some good teams. So I'm quietly impressed with the Montreal Canadiens. Is it going to mean anything in the end? Probably not, but they are only 3 points out from the second wildcard spot behind the Ottawa Senators. That being said, they've got Philadelphia, Columbus, and Pittsburgh to catch up to in order to snag one of those spots. But the wildcard race, it always feels like the wildcard race in the East is close right up until the end. It is certainly interesting that the Habs have kind of at least brought themselves back into that conversation.
Yeah, it's there was a lot of heat on Marty St. Louis early in the year with the way the Canadiens started the campaign, and this is the type of like 17-3. It's not a great record, but it's competitive enough to where that's closer to the expectation that I think a lot of Canadiens fans had. Was this wasn't necessarily supposed to be a year where they're making the playoffs or getting 90 plus points, but fans and management wanted to see a step at least. They didn't want to see them back in the conversation for another top 5 pick. And this is closer to what everybody sort of envisioned in that market.
And also Lane Hudson, phenomenal month of December. As soon as that guy figures out where the defensive zone is, it's going to be game over for everybody else in the league. It's going to be good. He had a really good year.
Hey,
excuse me.
I don't know if he'll win the Calder, but my pick of Lane Hudson for the Calder, not looking too bad. I think he'll at least be a finalist at this point.
Not too shabby at all. Love it. Yeah, Jacob's pick for the Calder, Lane Hudson. He's gonna make it close. But that one looks like it's Macklin Celebrini between him and Michkov. So we'll see. But Lane Hudson's making it close with that month of December that he had. Okay, now let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by, you guessed it, Bet365. I was tempted to pick Czechia against Canada in the quarterfinal. of the World Juniors. I just have very little faith in this Canada team. They did nothing against the States. They've done nothing for me this tournament. It just looks like a write-off year, and maybe don't let Dave Cameron coach the team. Don't let the same guys pick the team. I don't like this team at all. They have awful vibes. Here's the way it's put that you could put it, Harm. They signed OHL fourth liners. Half these guys are going to be working at Lordco in a few years. And no disrespect to anybody who works at Lordco or these teenagers. But man, like, I'm just looking at it. How many of these players are going to have like a future in pro hockey? And I don't think the answer is everyone. And if you go back and look at the World Junior teams of past, usually the answer is everyone, whether that be, in Europe or wherever. Man, I'm just looking at this team, and you go look at what these guys do with their OHL clubs, and it's like they signed OHL fourth liners to be on the fourth line of Team Canada. That's you're overthinking roster construction when you go get third pairing guys to play on your third pairing. If they're third pairing guys in junior, that's not taking advantage. Like, the third overall pick isn't on this team. Third overall pick from the most recent draft. Like, you're overthinking it. They overthought it, and the result is that they're an uninspiring team.
They left a ton of offense at home. It was questionable the way they picked their roster at the time. I think they're paying the price for that now. And coaching wise, they need a shakeup.
Still, it's silly, man. It's silly. It's just stupid. Yeah, it's just whatever. Anyways, okay. What were we doing? The bet.
and I'll pop in. One of those guys they left behind, local kid from Vancouver, Andrew Cristal, who is projected for 56 goals and 133 points for the Kelowna Rockets this year. Don't you think they could have used some of that offense on this team right now? You know, and a guy who last year in Kelowna had 40 goals and 111 points. He's a former second round pick for Washington.
And not to mention, Cristal's not a he's not a 18-year-old. Isn't he 19?
He's a 19-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, little more older, little more experience. The one thing I will say is Gavin McKenna, he's going to be good in a few years, but like, they don't have that star power right now on this team. That's the other thing I see when I watch Team Canada right now.
Yeah, and part of that is like the one thing
16?
to keep in mind is guys like Celebrini, for example, could be eligible for this tournament for Canada, and they aren't, right? So some of their best players are kind of already in the NHL in that sort of age category. Would Bedard technically still be elible?
Yes, he is.
Bedard is still eligible.
And these would be the best line mates he's played with in years.
So like that's something to keep in mind. But you're right. I think when they announced the team and we were looking at roster projections for the forward lines, a lot of people kind of saw this coming, or at least had concerns about the lack of oomph at the top of the lineup.
Sorry to the Lordco workers who listen to the show. I love Lordco. Like, I wasn't trying to throw a shot at Lordco.
I was gonna say Lordco's
I love
awesome.
Lordco. Lordco's an awesome place. You know where else is awesome? Home Depot. I was at Home Depot today. I've been going there a lot lately. I love Home Depot. Yeah. Anyways, okay. I think 19 Nathan is a little late, maybe on a delay. He said, "I'm out. Too much Petey Miller talk. Post when you're back to non-soap opera." Just fast forward. You know, like that was the first like 5 minutes of the show. It felt like whole conversation. Now we're on Home Depot talk. You'll like this. So fast forward in the show. But I still haven't given a bet, so let's do that. Our Bet365 bet to the day, or bet of the day. Excuse me. Who do we got on the NHL slate tonight? Because we're not betting against Team Canada. We're not going to do it. I'm not doing it. Ooh, Canucks are underdogs against the Kraken tonight, but I still don't like that. I am going to go with the other underdogs somehow. The Calgary Flames are underdogs hosting the Utah Hockey Club. I'm taking the Calgary Flames plus 105 on the money line to beat Utah tonight. That was our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Must be 90 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, folks, fill out our survey. Our Family Feud survey is in the podcast description, YouTube description, wherever you're watching the show, you can find the Family Feud survey. Fill it out. We're going to play next week. We'll be back tomorrow to break down tonight's game and preview another one, a back-to-back. Nashville Predators. Canucks back at home to take on the Predators tomorrow. But we will close it out there. For my co-host, Harman Downer, technical producer, Jacob Lazar. My name is Dave Gugelli. Thanks so much for such an episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.